So feel free to talk. So many of why we record those meetings, because then people can go back in what we have discussed. A lot of knowledge that we share and things, we cannot find those conversations within the papers that we publish. So it's important to have the meetings recorded. Keep your microphone on mute during the presentations, but feel free to open them as you want when we're talking. As I said, today we're a smaller group, so you can just open, don't need to raise your hand. But if you can, so if someone is talking, you can speak up afterwards, please raise your hand, because then we can organize this conversation. Open your cameras if you can, and if you are comfortable with that. It's always good to see everyone's face. And use the chats for doubts, questions, and comments. We are taking notes, so maybe you may not see some of the notes within the documents that we're going to use, but we will upload and populate these documents as the week goes by. So we have three resources that we are using to take those notes. So we have Google Drive, where we centralize the files. I'm going to post the link here in the chat. We are also using a Jamboard, because it's a file where we can post comments. It's very simple. And it's what we are going to use during the session. Yulia is here with me. She's going to present herself later. We're going to do a round of presentations. She's gonna help me sharing the screen and making the notes and comments and everything else. So you're going to be able to post your own comments. You don't need to wait to speak that. And we also have a report. Mostly we're probably going to add content to the report later. Each day and each meeting has a different report. It helps us organize the ideas, because it may be different conversations within the same day. So also you're going to have the link. So today it's important that we focus on a different theme. So we're going to speak about operational infrastructure. And when we talk about infrastructure, we're thinking in the broad sense. So we're not just thinking about equipments and buildings, but we're also thinking about people, okay, and resources that we have. For instance, lab resources are infrastructure, okay, supplies are infrastructure. We are going to have a keynote talk. It's a little bit longer than 30 minutes from one of our colleagues from Portugal. Then we are going to have a round discussion. Probably we're going to be around that the whole time. So as yesterday, we're going to have, we can search for best practices that are more general in terms of infrastructure, but it would be important for us also to think about the challenges that we find in terms of infrastructure and human resources, and which are the key strategies to enhance this operational capacity and develop more high-skilled teams in these least developed areas of the ocean. In the end, if we have time, and if anyone would like to showcase experience and projects, we can share your screen and have some time for you to talk a little bit about your personal experience in terms of projects, and then we can close and wrap up. So before I will do the round presentation now. You can introduce yourselves if you want, and then I will play who is presentation. So most of our presenters are in the field now. It seems that it's a busy week. So I asked them to record also, that we could play these the same presentations, but all the questions and things, I also know a lot of who is project, so I may be able to answer, and I will pass along some of the questions. Julia, would you like to start? Present.
Yeah, hello. My name is Julia Santi, and I'm working at the European Marine Biological Resource Center, which is a European infrastructure for marine biology. And I'm actually currently working on the Genomic Observatory project, which is using omics techniques to observe biodiversity in coastal areas around the European water. And yeah, I'm here as a co-lead, helping Carol moderate the session.
Thanks a lot, Julia. Shirley?
Hi, everybody. I see some familiar faces. We were just in a meeting together. So I'm Shirley Parkenans. I am the benthic ecosystem long-term ecological research coordinator here at SAION in South Africa. We have certain parts of the South African coast. South African coast is about just a little bit over 3,500 kilometers long. And we have certain areas which we call sentinel sites that we collect long-term data from for dissemination to everybody that needs it freely. It's a government initiative. So we are well, our main mandate is to collect both environmental data and now biodiversity data over many, many years to help with policy making, management, and anybody that needs it in South Africa and worldwide. So everything we collect is made available, and that is mostly where Tim comes in, the data handling and then disseminated to whoever needs it, any stakeholders in our research. And today I will be talking a little bit about my benthic research and how we do that and how we approach it to make it, to ensure now that it will have a long life, both financially and that it facilitates repeated collection of data for many, many years, not 10 years, not 20 years, but beyond. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Shirley. Tim was here yesterday also representing you. And together with you, Tim, it's good to know that you work with data. We're going to have tomorrow mostly focus on data. And it's always fun to have everyone from the long-term sites. We learn a lot. Everyone is a big team. In Brazil, it's like a community. So thanks a lot for being here and taking the time. So I'll pass to Tim and then.
Hi, I'm Tim. Two computers in one room. I'm Tim Parkenans. I'm the senior developer at the L1 Coastal Node of the South African Environmental Observation Network. Shirley's given you a bit of a summary, but yeah, our mandate is to provide research infrastructure, so the actual instruments, as well as the data that comes out of it. SAION's interesting, unique in this field because we have 4 terrestrial nodes, each focusing on a different biome. Then our node in Port Elizabeth is the coastal node. Then we have an offshore node in Cape Town. And recently, we're now going down to the Arctic. So we, from the Limpopo to the pole, we basically have instruments all over the place. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tim. What an effort. Let me see on my list. Lisa?
Hi, everyone. Again, I think we've met on yesterday or in another session. And just a quick background, I have a background in marine sciences. I've been working with the IOC UNESCO as a consultant and right now with the capacity development team. I'm new to OBPS, but I do have a background in monitoring, long-term monitoring, but more with birds and pollutants monitoring in freshwater aquatic systems. So I'm just curious to find out more about OBPS and the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Tomorrow we're going to talk a lot about data, so it will be probably go more into OBPS and all of that, and also invite you to the meetings if you want. Later I will contact you. Mabel, thanks a lot for being again here, Lisa. Mabel too.
Buenos días, buenos días. Soy estudiante de la UNAM Managua. También soy docente, imparto las clases de biología, química y física en high school. Tengo aproximadamente ya 2 años y medio de experiencia en el área ambiental, pero en el desarrollo, en el área oceanográfica, pues realmente estoy adquiriendo bastante conocimiento, está muy enriquecedores los talleres que han impartido y ya los estoy compartiendo con mis alumnos de secundaria, de high school. Están muy entusiasmados con los proyectos para la protección del océano y quieren involucrarse. Entonces la idea es
I will translate,
adquirir.
Mabel. Sorry, Mabel.
Okay.
Can everyone see her translation, the caption? You can see the caption while she speaks? Okay. Okay, Mabel, there we go.
Entonces, eso es la visión, poder compartir, replicar, reproducir y tratar de hacerlo a un bajo costo.
Thanks again for being here. I asked that because I can't see your translation. Luckily, I can understand a little bit of Spanish. Thanks for being here, and I'm sure it's a great environment for you to learn and network within the OBPS community. You're going to see everyone in all those meetings, and people are very engaged. Ulan, I don't know if it's how I pronounce, if I pronounced right.
Hi, hello. Hi, hello. Yes, you pronounce it perfectly. Hi, my name is Wulan, and I'm from Indonesia. I work as a researcher at the National Research and Innovation Agency, Republic of Indonesia. I'm actually doing research in the marine pollution, so it's quite far from the theme. However, specifically I'm marine ecotoxicology, but of course, as I work specifically at the Research Center for Oceanography, so all these things basically interconnected, and also at the same time, so I'm part of the research group that basically researching the marine diversity around Sulawesi Sea or Celebes Sea. So, and I'm here to learn from everyone else, and it's great to know actually what you've been doing at all this, and also the other best practices that's been shared here. Thank you.
Thanks, Wulan. It's always great to have people from the Pacific, and it's important that we have this view from around the world, and we can share. We seem to think that our problems or challenges are different, but usually they aren't, and we can come up with solutions together. Yana, I think you were the last one.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon, however, wherever you are. We met yesterday. I'm a marine biologist working at the National Department of Fisheries and Marine Research in Cyprus. Main concentration is on monitoring, recording, and managing biodiversity in marine protected areas, coastal and offshore in the island.
Thanks, Yana, a lot. Thanks for being here again. So I am Ana Carolina Mazzucco. You can call me Carol or Ana. I have a background, I'm an ocean scientist. I have a background on oceanography and also biology. My research field was focused on coastal ecology and also now more recently biodiversity patterns, but I also like this interface between benthic and pelagic coupling. Since 5 years ago, I started, so I'm planning a long-term ecological research site. I'm responsible for implementing it in the eastern coast of Brazil, focused on understanding the effects of climate change in this area in several coastal habitats. And I also manage so in the end of 2009, we reactivated the Brazil node of OBPS. So we have been diving into data a lot. I love data, I'm a data person. So it's how we came across all these discussions in the OBPS and have joined the community, and we're trying to put the environment up within other regions of the world. Okay, so I'm going to play who is recording. Who is a partner from Portugal. He has an amazing project with sensors that he's installing, temperature sensors, those loggers around the world. And he has also put a community together to monitor and gather EBVs. Let me know if you can hear, okay, his presentation. Yesterday we had a problem with the sound, but I guess I figure out. Okay.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you, Carol, for inviting me to talk about this topic that I like so much, which is about operational infrastructure and how to sustain monitoring efforts long-term when resources are an issue. So I'll briefly start just by mentioning 3 things that everyone knows, but still are worthy of a mention. First of all, if left unchecked, logistics and infrastructure will break any long-term effort in monitoring anything in marine habitats, especially because loggers get destroyed. There's just too much inertia and setbacks that occur, especially when we're operating in places like, for example, in Guinea-Bissau, where you have to take boats to go off to the islands, and there's no communication, no power that you can efficiently rely on. And so if you don't plan for that very, very stringently, those issues will creep up and eventually will unravel the long-term aspect of whatever you're trying to do in this type of situations. But also, it's also very important to note that this issue with the lack of resources and the difficulties that it generates in some sites, it cannot be just swept under the rug, because unfortunately, scarcity of resources is not randomly distributed in space. It would still be an issue, even if it was, but since it isn't, what this means is that if we don't try to go to these sites, despite the difficulties, we'll end up with data sets that are not representative of what's out there. And there are many ecoregions, especially the tropics and deserted areas, where there's very little information, and then one can only wonder how models that are trying to answer questions on a large scale, they're probably not representing these places accurately enough. So we need to tackle this. This is not something we can just choose not to do. And this obviously has very important consequences. So we've recently, for example, looked at the warming rates of sea surface temperature across the entire ocean, and just realized that in here, this spot, which is between the border of Morocco and Mauritania in Northwest Africa, for example, in here we can find just next to each other one of the areas that is cooling the most, the blue part in the north, and the red blob to the south is one of the areas of the entire ocean that is warming fastest for the last 3 decades. And so this leads us to suspect that there was just a shift in the quelling regime. It was an intense quelling area, and now it's not an quelling area anymore. So it's warming quite a lot. But this is an area for which, for example, in Rocky Shores, which is where I work primarily, there's very little information about the biodiversity that was there. And so we lost this opportunity to, at the very least, to document a very strong and important change in the environment, and whether or not that has been reflected in the biodiversity patterns there. And this also means that, again, unfortunately, these areas, the most under-resourced areas where little research is being done, the lack of information then leads to governments and stakeholders not being able to manage resources effectively, and it's just exacerbates inequality furthermore. And so we need to tackle this and just try to overcome the challenges that are posed in these locations. And so what we need to try to achieve, first and foremost, to operate in this type of sites is operational resilience. So we need to build up an infrastructure and a modus operandi that allows us to still get our goals completed, despite the enormous difficulties that we'll have to face, and especially focusing on the long-term aspect of it, which just adds up a whole different dimension compared to doing this work on these regions once and then that's it. So I'll use a little bit this project that I'm co-leading with Fernando Lima, which some of you might know. It's a very large project in terms of spatial and temporal scope, and so I think it fits really well into this presentation. So I'll use it as an example. So very briefly, what we're trying to set up is over 160 sites all over the Atlantic to monitor intertidal temperatures and biodiversity on all types of rocky shores. And this means microtidal, macrotidal, islands, continents, urban, remote areas, polar, everything. We're trying to really be representative and eventually capture the signal of the global warming in the intertidal and its consequences on biodiversity. And so naturally, in a project like this, we have to deal with how to operate in under-resourced locations. And so I will not try to be exhaustive, and I'll actually focus on 3 of the things that from my experience, I think they are most critical and perhaps most helpful to whomever is working in this type of situations. So this would be to focus on the essentials, and I'll lay these things out in the next slides, but focus on the essentials, don't carry the way and try to do too much, to try to build a methodology that is simple and robust. That's the only way you can do it for a long period of time. and also try to have tiered outputs. And I'll explain this a little bit in the end. So as I was mentioning, perhaps the most important thing that at least for me, from conversations with other people and inevitably when people ask questions about this project and the way I conduct the work, I always get, if I was to get a cent for all the time that I got these questions that are up on the top left corner of the slide, just why do you only focus on temperature? What else are you measuring? And I have to explain that I am only measuring temperature. For the specific aims that I have for this network, temperature is the only thing. It obviously, in this fantasy world, I would love to have other parameters, but to do it with the resources that I have and with the spatial scope that we want, temperature is the only thing that we can do reliably, and also is the one variable that explains most of the diversity that we're trying to record. And so resist the temptation, so your inner temptation to expand the monitoring targets. And by monitoring targets, I mean to add another variable, environmental variable, or to monitor biodiversity or whatever you're monitoring in an additional way. And also the pressure, because people will always be questioning you, because sometimes it's not ill intention, it's just that when you're talking to someone about this project and another project, people are not fully invested in thinking on the feasibility of what they are proposing. And so it's you that have to obviously be open-minded, because we never know everything, and some advices might actually be quite good. But at the same time, be confident that if you've gone through the reasoning and you reach the conclusion of why you can't really do some parameters and you can do others, just stick to it, and remember that sometimes by recording less, you become able to record better and for a longer period of time. And so if longer is a key part of the network, or the effort that is being put forth, then that is the guiding star that you cannot forget about it. And so, and even when you have 3-4 parameters that you'd like to measure, and you have some leeway to choose, just be mindful as well that some, especially environmental parameters, some of them are low maintenance and others are high maintenance. And by this, I mean, for example, temperature is something that once you deploy a sensor, depending on the types of sensor, obviously, but nowadays there are sensors that are quite robust and they can withstand a lot for a long period of time with no maintenance at all. And even if things grow on top, if there's falling on the sensor, you can still measure a temperature that will bar some very great falling. It will still be very representative of what you're trying to measure. But for example, if you're looking for conductivity, then you have a sensor that you have to do maintenance on, and that you have to do calibrations, periodic calibrations. Even things like, for example, light intensity. It's not a sensor that you have to for sure calibrate every now and then, depending on applications, obviously, but you may get a reading that is not as representative as things grow on top of the transparent part of the sensor, and so less light is collected. So these practical aspects are quite important, and whenever possible, go for the approach that requires least maintenance, because maintenance is going to be an issue. That's no discussion about that. In under-resourced locations, maintenance is always going to be an issue. So whenever possible, just remove that from the list of concerns. And now as well, this is just, it's like coverage, and by coverage, I mean making sure that whatever monitoring effort you're doing includes under-resourced and hard-to-reach locations, then it will always demand trade-offs. Otherwise, it would have been done already. If it's not done already, it's because it's hard. And so you have to just let go of some things that ideally would be done so that in return, you do the other parts, the crucial ones, you do them well. Now, regarding teams and whenever collaboration of a large number of individuals is important, it's very important that right at the onset of the conception of the idea and even before going out into the field and starting to do the work, it's very important that things are, the dimension of the work is decided on the basis of an honest assessment of the commitment of all individuals. And by all individuals, I mean ourselves as well, and our partners. Ourselves, because sometimes, especially in academia, we overcommit to a lot of things, and the work that getting to under-resourced locations requires cannot be underestimated. Even just the mere fact of getting permits and going from the airport into the field sometimes can be quite a mission. And so it takes a lot of time, even before the trip happens. And after the trip has finished, there's still a lot of work to do, and that cannot be overlooked. Otherwise, it will just overwhelm everything that is trying to be done. And regarding the partners, they will not necessarily share your excitement for the work you're trying to implement, at least not at the level that will guarantee that they will handle the sacrifices that sometimes the work requires merrily and over a long period of time. So you need to really measure the amount of work that you ask other people to do in relation to the horizon, the temporal horizon you want for the effort, and be sure that it is well balanced and it's not too much, and that people will not just get fatigued it's very easy, and there's many examples where people just become exhausted from doing a certain methodology that takes a lot of time. They might have time today, tomorrow they might be teaching some classes and having their own projects, and so the workload needs to be very well balanced. Otherwise, things just unravel through time. The other thing that might actually be very important is just to start a trial of the methodology as soon as possible and to evaluate performance. To do it first ourselves, then with a partner that you trust to be a good guinea pig, and then using that information to adapt the methodology accordingly. Obviously, always without sacrificing the scientific aspect of what you're trying to build, otherwise it doesn't even make sense. But for example, we started measuring temperatures, focusing on the pictures that have the blue border. We start measuring temperatures in the intertidal with sensors that were hidden inside of real input shells, and they were glued on the surface of the rock. This would, for example, require us to connect to a computer and download things in the field. And this was fairly okay for a network that we maintain over the Atlantic coast of continental Europe for a long period of time, but it very quickly became all time consuming for us. And at the same time, the methodology was so complex that we tried, but we couldn't really get other people to do it properly. And so we were with our hands tied. We couldn't really pass the baton to other people, even though some of the sites that we were monitoring were actually really near to existing labs from people we would collaborate in papers, but to have them maintain the network for instead of us going out into the field, it was not possible. So what we did was to actually partner with engineers to develop the sensors that we needed to test an array of sensors, as you see here below, deployed in multiple ways and trying to see if they were all measuring the same thing. And eventually we were able to settle with a new way to deploy the loggers inside of poles, as you see on the right. That is so much more resilient, so much more low maintenance in the future, into the future, that it completely changed the way we do the work. And so I'm not saying this is replicable in all settings, but whenever possible, it's very important to explore these adjustments in methodology that allow for a step change on how you do the work. The other thing that is, it was not intentional at the beginning, but came as a very interesting add-on to the way we do the work, is that because we settled for the deploying loggers inside of poles that we drill on the rock, the deployment of the loggers became much harder. So the initial effort became much greater, but effort from then on became much more reduced, because in the early days, we would have to replace damaged loggers every year that we would go out to the field. Now we do a lot of work on the first time that we go to the field, and we set up a site. And from then on, it's just collecting data with a cell phone, and that's it. And so by shifting the effort up front, we can now go into the field ourselves the first time and deploy the loggers and do all the hard work ourselves. And then either we return to the site and the work is easy for us, or we can even ask other people to go out and collect the data, because they don't have to carry a driller, they don't have to carry the epoxies or even the loggers. They just need to go out to the field and collect the data for us. And so collaborations and depending on other people became all that much easier. And this is something to be explored whenever possible. Another thing is to try and be proactive. Especially if you then are relying on other people to collect information for you, you need to take the steps to reduce the likelihood of their mistakes. Well, to be honest, of your own mistakes as well, but those you can always work and try to be pay more attention and deal with variables as much as possible to make your work be more streamlined. But especially when you are relying on other people, there's no way getting around it. They will do mistakes, and the more you streamline, you simplify, and you automate the work that they will have to do, the better, because less mistakes they do. So for example, in our case, what we did is that we leveraged the use of smartphones, because the new loggers that we designed with our engineers, they work with near field communication, and so we can use smartphones to communicate with the loggers. And so once they are embedded on the rock, we can use a smartphone to collect the data, and it's very easy. And we even have this application is programmed by our team, And we added a mode of operation within the application where the person that is downloading the data doesn't even need to know the details of how the mission is running on the logger, if it is collecting data every hour, every half an hour. It doesn't really matter, because the phone is set up in such a way that you just need to touch the logger, the data is downloaded, erased from the memory of the logger, and the new mission is programmed. And this way, the only thing, obviously there's always ways for people to do mistakes, but the only thing that our partners now have to do is to actually find the loggers. And after they find them, they just need to touch the logger with the smartphone and the data is collected. And this way, not only the work is easier for us, but also the work is easier for them, and it's easier for us and for us to rely on their help in terms of collecting the data without files being corrupted or with the wrong timestamps and time zones and all types of things that happen all the time. And for example, we also made sure that the application saves a log file in addition to the data itself, and that the data is a very comprehensive header file that has all the information about the logger, where the data was collected from. And all this together, as I mentioned, we're automating all this, and especially log keeping, so that when a partner goes into the field and collects data for us, they don't need to keep a log of what they are doing, which loggers they worked on, and at what time. It's all in the file. And so this way, the less you ask people to do, the easier it is for them to keep up with the work and to do it better. Now, another thing that is important, and especially when it comes to biodiversity, I think this is a general pattern, regardless of whether you are doing surveys in the open ocean or in the rocky shores and wherever. There's many ways to measure biodiversity, and obviously there's that temptation that I mentioned already to try and be as exhaustive as possible. If you're doing something long-term and in under-resourced locations, you need to sacrifice some resolution. Otherwise, you're going to have a methodology that is so complex that it will happen once, and then over time, the ability for partners to do that work, their interest will fade. It's inevitable. If that doesn't happen, you're lucky, but most often than not, that's what will happen. And so sacrifice resolution to the point where you can still do your, still achieve the goals of your monitoring effort, but do it for expediency and feasibility, and especially for standardization. So the simpler the method is to collect the data, the easier it is for people to do it properly, and then for data to be standardized and comparable through sites. And this also makes work count. So if people are collecting data, and because the methodology is simple, they can do it without mistakes, their work will not have been in vain. Their work will count because it will be incorporated into the data set, and it will be used in publications and so on and so on. And so it's very important to pare down everything as much as possible. This needs, if an operation is going to happen long-term in under-resourced location, it needs to be a simple operation as much as possible. And so, for example, in this case, we're now in the process of finalizing validations, but we're settling up for a way to record biodiversity where we use, again, smartphones to collect photo quadrats. There's an app we're also developing to try and guide people in ensuring that they take the best picture possible, and that metadata is collected that we need for our analysis. But so, for example, this is a perfect example of sacrificing resolution. obviously the photo products will be much higher quality if we were using cameras, proper photographic cameras. But then getting the data out and sent to our servers and organized in a way where you can be receiving data from 160 sites all over the Atlantic, from multiple partners, and not get lost of what photo quadrant is from where and from when, it's not feasible. So we have to rely on smartphones. Obviously, the quality of the picture will be a little bit diminished. And so, but that's something that we'll have to handle afterwards. We've done validations to the point where we know that we can get most information. But eventually it might be the case that for some sites, in some situations, the quality will not be good enough for us to go to the species level, for example, and then we settle for functional groups. You can still do a lot of work. And again, if you're doing something, for example, as we're doing, and we're monitoring the entire Atlantic, if we can get good information about functional groups from the entire Atlantic, that's already really, really good. And so we're sacrificing resolution because otherwise we couldn't do it in such a large area. And this actually segues into my last point, which would be, don't pin the success of your whatever endeavor you're trying to make on achieving all the outputs that you can from that network, because otherwise that's a recipe for failure. Things will happen. There will be, of all these sites that we're going to set up, I'm sure that maybe 25% of them will not be able to return to them, or loggers might fail, or a partner that we had to go out there and collect data, they will move away to some other university, to some other part of the world, and we can't find another partner. These type of things will happen. But as long as you're building the work in a way, like, for example, what we're trying to do is, the first time that we go and set up all the sites, we're going to collect biodiversity. That is easy because we're going to do it ourselves, and so we're sure that it's going to be properly collected. And so that in itself will be a snapshot of biodiversity of the entire Atlantic. That already, to put it in simple words, that pays already for the network and for the effort, if we get that. If we get more than that, like if we get 5 years of temperature data, 10 years of temperature data, and if we get a second survey, and in some sites, especially the ones closest to urban areas and where we have very reliable partners, we'll probably have biodiversity surveys on a yearly frequency. So we'll have a tiered outputs. So there's a minimum that we want to get, and that should be fairly easy to get to. And there's other goals that we have as well. So obviously you need to be to have ambition and try to achieve as much as possible with whatever you're trying to do, but be sure to make it so that even there's a fallback plan where there's still success even if you can't do it all. And so with this, I would end this presentation. As I said, it's not an exhaustive exploration of everything that needs to be considered in terms of operational infrastructure. I'm open to questions afterwards, whenever anyone wants. If I can offer some advice, obviously I'd be very, very interested in doing that, and also in collaborations as well. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, everyone. So as you saw, Rui has started an amazing job. And he probably made our work in the session easier because he pointed out several best practices. I will go over the slides. I have the slides separate here so we can populate the documents. So before we go into, so we will have about 1 hour to discuss the questions that I passed before, but I would like to know if anyone has a comment that would like to share, or a question within the work. I think questions could be maybe towards to him, but if you feel free to comment, if you agree or disagree in anything, this will be recorded and we can also show Rui and everyone later. The floor is yours. While you're doing that, I'm opening the other documents. Shirley, Tim, have you heard about this project before?
No, actually, we do collect shallow water temperature, but no, we haven't. It was very informative, and I think really realistic points made on the challenges with setting up a long-term research project, especially this of this scale. Very impressed. Questions that come to mind is I take it these loggers aren't do have to be replaced in time. It would be interesting to know what that time frame is. Is it 10 years or every 20 years that he has to actually, or the project has to actually visit the original site and replace the hardware?
There are some of the loggers now, the ones that they developed later, they may be in the field about 10 years. So one thing that they are figuring out, actually they haven't tested yet, is how long they're going to be there on the rocks, because they may last, but they may, you know, fall apart. For instance, we had some in our LTR site, but they were not, they were like, we didn't make holes to put them, because our rocks, you can't do that. It's not like so. And so they lasted for like 2 years. So then we had, they were like, we had to replace them, but they are testing in the with better glues and things like that. It was about, I guess, 10 years. It can be maximum for the sites that you can't go very often, for sure.
Yeah. Because bringing up the actual servicing of this and getting the data, we have all around the South African coast a temperature network that we are taking custodianship of, mostly because the regional custodians can't keep servicing or getting the data. So it's starting to just merge into say on trying to keep the network going. And we deploy a hobo temperature logger at a depth of 5 meters on the shore, rocky shores. So we find a hole, we have a piece of railway sleeper that was cut, a short one, and then we find a hole and we stick it in there and hope nobody finds it, make up where it is, and then in 8 months or a year we actually retrieve it and put a new one in. So it's a constant service, going out to these remote, very remote places at times and finding, hopefully, that nobody took it or found it or that it got buried, and retrieving the data. And if it's lost, it's 8 months to a year of lost data. It's not, so this making the servicing so much easier that you can frequently go and just click on it and get it downloaded is so valuable to do. You still have to travel there and get the data, but the chance, and also securing it in the rock, it doesn't move. You know where it is. For the subtidal stuff, of course, it's a little bit more difficult. You drilling in the shore surf line or underwater. It's the logistics of that is it will be very difficult. But we have, I'm very impressed by the layout, and I would like to see it for everywhere, not just the Atlantic. You know, you want to put it over into the Pacific and the Indian Ocean as well. So it's a very sober, thought out initiative. That's all I can say. Where you?
Does anyone? Yeah, sorry, I was just listening to you and downloading who is the slide. Just to get the messages. I think they might help us a lot here. Yes, and I think one of the things that he mentioned also, and it's nice that we have options of technology. So most of us rely on hobos, and hobos developed the Bluetooth after the envy loggers. So for instance, we had hobos and then they started developing the envy loggers, and we got some of them, like they provided us just to test because they were testing the technology. Is this also a way that they can test the sensors and develop better ones? And so the thing for us was that, okay, for us that work in the intertidal, this part, it was about arriving and getting the data with the cell phone. So that was like, whoa. But then Hobo developed one very similar. And now we, like, you have both of the them working similarly. The difference is that Hobos don't last not yet for that long. So the battery, it is still like but it's good to have options, and also like with pricing, they are about the same. So this is something maybe we can discuss with the operational. So we thought, okay, is it going to be cheaper than Hobos? Because if yes, and they have similar technology, so I think those discussions are good, especially if it goes and it has an investment that it can be deployed in places that with less resource, because for us, everything that is in US dollars is totally, it's 5 times the same. I can imagine in many of the places also.
18 times.
Yeah. Okay.
Very so could you actually put in the chat what the make and model of those have they? Okay, I wasn't following, because that's very valuable for us. We always look for better technology that does the same job. It's one of our main focuses, is not to be stagnant, but find the technology that makes it easier to collect that long-term data sets. Okay. EV loggers.
Does anyone want to comment on the presentation and the subjects too, before we move to our activity?
Yeah, one question, if we would like to know more of this program and maybe contribute or help out, or do we just contact Rui or email him? Is that the best way to do it?
Yes, Shirley, I guess is the best way. We can put you, if you want, we can put you in contact. If you want to send, you can just email him, or if you want us to say that you were in the meeting, you can just send me your email. I was just talking to Rui here on the cell phone saying that he's amazing because they are on the field now. That's why they are not being here. So they are expanding the networks. So yeah, they are looking for reliable partners. So this is very important on the discussions we had, because they are So they had, for instance, in Brazil, some partners already, but for the new sensors and like to have this snapshot of the biodiversity, we were discussing about partners that would be able to keep, for instance, the LTRs and things that have the expertise and are doing already and are interested in, because they don't sell, like for the partners, they provide the sensors. So this is also good in terms of receiving these equipments that may save you some money to do something else. So we can show.
Because we have all these sites around the coast, they get serviced already. The effort of going there to do things, it's already in motion. That is already there. So you take that out of the equation. If you can add these type of things, that we do rocky shore monitoring long term along the coast as well, in collaboration with some of our conservation partners, which is very interested. So it's mostly in MPAs. We like to work in MPAs because the equipment is safer in a way, because there's regulations. It's not just on the coast and somebody can pick it up and it disappears. So a lot of our work we do in MPAs and with our partners, but we're already going there. We're already traveling. We're already visiting the site. And if it's this easy to download the data, it's not a major effort for us to be a partner in such things. So it's very exciting.
Thanks, Shirley. I added from your comments, I added already, Julia, to our document. It's about collaborating. So this is one thing that I guess it's amazing from the long-term sites, the official and the non-officials, okay, but like we can think about you know, having those sites that people go all the time. It's because it's there. A lot of the efforts, the biggest effort is already in motion, and so collaborating and to share infrastructure and other things, it's sure a best practice if we are under-resourced. So I guess most of you can share. You can see the Jamboard. Okay. So you can we can start about sticky notes here about those general best practices that help us sustain long-term monitoring, both diversity and ecosystems. I don't know if you have used that before, but you can just click in one side as Julia just did. There are some notes and you get a sticker and put in different colors. I'm going to open Ruiz's slide and start adding some comments there. Sure.
Can you all edit the document and add notes? You can try the link I put in the chat.
OBPS, they all know what that is. Ocean best practices.
Yeah, ocean best practices systems, all this, I don't know how to say that in English, acronyms.
Yeah.
I get crazy.
There you are. Everybody knows what OBPs are. I'm trying this. There. How's that? Yeah, there we go. That was easy. First time. Make it pink. A question. Yeah, especially with this, it's how they do the photographs from the cell phones and how they analyze the data. That's an ingenious way to do it, and really quick. So it would be good to have those the methodology to know how to. So I'll definitely email Rui.
Yeah, I will ask him also the question, but we haven't tested this part yet here, because this is new development with the images automatically. We would just upload the data. So I can't, but it should be, because the app for downloading the data was very, very simple. It was great.
Yeah.
You already upload to Google, for instance, you wouldn't need to like move around. So okay. Also, he said about low maintenance. We can think about infrastructure also, if anyone is more into the lab. Okay, so infrastructure is not just in the field. We can think about the other part. So if you are acquiring data to monitor, sometimes you need a lab to get the data. You can't just, you go to the field, you sample, and then you have to process that to acquire the data. So this is part of monitoring. So if anyone wants to think of that way, and not, this may not have been covered by Rui's presentation.
Yeah, also, which I enjoyed, and was a question that came up in a previous workshop for technologies for under-resourced countries, was a question that somebody asked, the analytical software and calibration software we use at the moment is not open source. It was very interesting to see how actually planning and getting the best software or product to make your life easier down the line can actually promote longevity of a program. Not necessarily that it is just cheap. It has to make the person that collects the data and the person that analyzes the data's life easier to be reusable and maintainable over very long periods of time, because otherwise, like he said, it's just too much for the people to collect the data. And just having that app, that system where you can just put the sensor next to your temperature sensor and download the data, and having all that technology that's behind it, might not be the cheapest technology, but in the long end, it definitely pays for itself. I don't know if that makes sense.
Does anyone want to comment on what Shirley just said? I totally agree, but I would like to hear from our folks here. There was this, Shirley, this comment that you said, it came across yesterday's late meeting. Also, the thing about making the life easier when you are acquiring the data, and also that making sure that the person doesn't screw up the data. Okay, so and it means like even the best scientists skilled, you may be dealing with a different technology that you're used. So it sure is, and it comes across the operational infrastructure, because yeah. So if we can maybe summarize that and add here. Okay.
It's a simple thing that you can collect tons of good data, and if you would lose a simple metadata information line such as position, time taken, or then it's useless. So that backup of making it as easy as possible, that you don't have the mistakes that creep in or the loss of data, is it's very impressive that was thought of.
Okay. Yana, Lisa, Mabel, Ting, Lan, Would you like
Hi,
to
hello.
comment on that? I'm just calling you randomly, so
Yes, no worries. Sorry, I didn't open my camera. But anyway, I just go straight to the question. I just jumped straight to the question that Shirley asked actually about, you know, just to maintain all this data. And actually that's exactly what I've been, well, basically seeing, you know, in a group when we talk about the marine biodiversity data, and that's why I'm here actually to know, is there any way, you know, the best practice actually to how we record this data. Okay, we know how to do that, and you know, I'm coming from a country like Indonesia where we have so many isolated area, but then also working with the partner at the same time, it's challenging. Even in our own group, it's just challenging to make, you know, all the data that we need. It's there, and it's absolutely right that, you know, one simple thing, for example, just you know, the time when we recorded the data, when it's not there, it could just basically really ruin whatever that we want to achieve. So is there any actually of you that could share any best practice or probably, you know, your experience on how to maintain this standard? At least, you know, when you collect it, it's just like all there, hopefully, and or minimize the emission basically of you know, all the data that we need. I'm sorry, that's another question, actually, really sorry.
Yeah, what I found really important in doing it, and because this program that I'm rolling out is very new in a way, and we had a really big mission in making it transportable and easy for people to use. And I always make a joke that the equipment was more made for men with big machines and boats and winches, not for women that pull things up by hand. And it's a different look at how to develop equipment that's not a pain to deploy or get the data from. And it by no means is my program as simplified as Rui's program, in that it's easy. There's very big difficulties with the way we collect data from under the water or from the seabed, but it is easier than and safer than the previous way of doing it, spending long hours on scuba or rebreathers at very big depths for people, collecting data that couldn't be reanalyzed. So I think there's definitely progress in how we make it easier from what it was. Not all projects will be always a simple tap of a phone to get the data after it's been deployed. There are projects that take a lot of effort to get the data every time, and needs a lot of infrastructure to run. If it's not infrastructure for big boats, it means infrastructure of people or association of people. Our idea is to actually make the community that is interested in the data bigger, and they become partners in this data that they collect, that becomes part of a community of practice ideology. But for me, for the BRAF systems especially, and the ocean-based practices library to have is very important. And also I find it really reassuring that some of these practices can now be endorsed by certain entities, and that it makes your choosing what to use to collect the data so much easier for the scientists to enable application of the FAIR principles. So if everybody uses the same recipe, the application, I always try to say, then we can all make the cupcake and they will all sort of taste the same, look the same, and we can compare them. And this is the same with the data. So we're using especially the Goose endorsed ocean best practice for a collection of imagery data. And it is very comprehensive in the way that it describes the equipment to be used, how it should be analyzed, but it doesn't restrict how it can be applied in different situations for different research questions. So that is very important, I think, if that answers the question of how should we do it? And for this, RURI should put together a standard practice of how the data is collected, what is needed, and it should be published as ocean-based practice and apply for endorsement so that we all know this is the way forward for a certain way. If it works really well, that everybody is open to adopt it freely. You have the actual, I'm going to say again, the recipe, how to actually collect the data and analyze, and you can compare it worldwide then. So it is essential, I think, to standardize in that way without limiting research, but then we can compare the cupcakes.
Surely, it was good that you mentioned that. I think who is aware, since he's on MBON network, so probably those practices will be published in the repositories and as best practices and things. But it's always good to reinforce that. I will pass the message. Actually, I'm going to pass the recording for him later. But I also see some hands here, Yana also, and it's good, Shirley, also before I leave Yana, that we all think about and pass this message along, sharing these and publishing these as best practices, because this may be lost along the way with all the things that we do. And if we don't document and we don't put, all this message will be lost as time goes by. So Jan?
I think at least coming from a small island in the Mediterranean, with our department being responsible for the marine area of the island. So we have very limited resources, both human and technical and equipment. So typically when there's always, at least in the ocean, there's always data you can collect and a wide range of data. So at least for us, it is important initially to have a very clear plan of, okay, there's always needs for data, but okay, so if we collect this data, where do we want to collect it from, which area? And then more importantly is, okay, so what are we going to do with this data set? How are we going to analyze it? How is it going to contribute? How does it tie in with our other library of data? Because just collecting data and leaving it sitting in a computer or in a lab waiting to be analyzed is not cost and time effective. So we need to have a very clear vision and plan of what will happen to the data. And in that case, we can prioritize our tasks and our new instruments that need to be bought, or where they're going to be placed, how long they will be recording, and so on. So at least for us, that's how we start planning our monitoring.
Yana, that was great that you mentioned that, because thinking about the data, we may not be on the data session, but if we don't plan these before, at least we think about the rationale of focusing and what we want on the data and how it's going to be analyzed. I think we may also, it's about like generating all this data, and it's not going to be processed by us or nobody else, because it's not going to be output. If we upload somewhere, I always think like this, okay, if you generate a lot of data, you may not be able to analyze and process and then generate information that at least it is uploaded to an international repository that someone can use it. But it's time consuming and also frustrating when we gather a lot of data and we don't see the information from that. So I guess in the regions that we are in, when we are in places that resource is limiting, this is a balance that we for sure, I don't know, plan ahead and think about that. So it was very nice that you mentioned that here in this discussion. And I don't know if you add a comment on that on the file, or if you want us, we can put that later also. Mabel, would you like to talk?
Sí, dentro de las medidas que se sugiere, pues que estoy pensando, es la colaboración de los protagonistas para la reducción de costos en la inversión para poder introducirse a hacer el estudio, debido a que las herramientas que se utilizan no llevan gran espacio. Puede crear una interacción de igual forma con los tour operadores que llevan turistas dentro de sus botes para avistamiento. Vendría a ser el resultado de eso que vamos a tener aulas de clase teórico-práctica, pero también promoviendo el turismo, enseñando la importancia del cuidado de los océanos a través de estos estudios, y que de forma sencilla las personas que tienen esa facilidad de estar continuamente viajando y haciendo viajes puedan cooperar a través de una subvención técnica para la persona que va a realizar este trabajo. Pues, ¿qué es lo que quiere decir con esto? Que la misma tour operadora puede subvencionar a través de alguna normativa o una ordenanza municipal o a través de las legislaciones que tienen que ver con cuencas hidrológicas, que tiene que ver con océanos. Pueden hacerse programas de educación que involucren a esta organización tan importante, y también realizar las prácticas in situ. Quiere decir esto que podemos enseñar, podemos participar con las personas, podemos educar y vamos a tener un mayor avance, porque este tema realmente es bastante desconocido. En la zona donde hay mejores condiciones para estos tipos de estudios es en la costa atlántica, por la claridad que hay del agua. En la zona del Pacífico es bastante turbia, pues.
Thanks, Mabel. I will try to summarize what you said because I can't translate everything. But what she highlighted mostly was about relying on collaboration and the existing network, that it is already in place. She mentioned about in the Caribbean. She also mentioned yesterday about, there are people and countries that have been going around. So mostly was about that, isn't it, Mabel? Or did I miss something? I was taking some notes here. Does anyone want to share experiences about collaborating in terms of infrastructure, how it helped you? It's not we will have a theme focus on that today, but I guess it is a best practice. I added here. So we may move to thinking about challenges. So what are the challenges that you find in terms of infrastructure and human resources? We haven't touched human resources yet. So the challenges here we do have in Brazil in terms of human resources is capacity building. So we lack on high-skilled professionals yet. So we do have a lot, but they are not enough. for covering the whole territory. So we have been feeling nowadays that in terms of really focusing on observing on the observatories, we still have to train a lot of people to keep those observatories running in the best way, and also to operate the infrastructure. So we may have people that, you know, they know or they study, but when we get in terms of managing the equipments and managing the sites and the persons, and this is still we lack on that. And you guys, I would like to hear from you.
I find that this is a problem for many countries, that, for example, the number of permanent personnel is low, and it's difficult for national organizations to hire new people, new permanent personnel. And this is important for the observatories because you generally need people to commit to something, learn a technique or a method, and be able to follow it in time. And you cannot rely on personnel from projects because those are for short terms, for 1 or 2 years, and you cannot adapt a whole observing project that you want to last for 10 years or beyond on project human resources.
Julia, have you found solutions about that?
Well, I think different countries are following different approaches. So, for example, some countries are investing in the few permanent personnel that already exist and train them from the start to perform new duties, new protocols, new methodologies, and then they are adapted to this. And they keep the other responsibilities for project funding, for example. In the case of Greece, that I know this is a problem, is that they hire personnel from project money, and then this personnel is doing many different things that are also operational for the organizations.
Okay, I'll add some notes on there on the document. We have Isabella. Thanks for joining. Isabella, would you like to present yourself, and then I will give a brief instruction about what we are doing and how we are conducting the meeting. Isabella is a good friend from Brazil. She lives in Europe now.
Hey guys, thank you for inviting me, Anna. I'm Isabella. I'm Brazilian, but now I'm living in Södertälje in Sweden. And my practice is on expertise lie on ecotoxicology and biomonitoring, environmental chemistry. It's recently I have been in a job fair to meet some startups, and one of them make me think about solutions regarding monitoring coastal events. This startup is doing collecting data from rivers in Africa. And so they started to monitoring the levels of rivers due to climate change. So they trained the natives, the tribes down there, and it was just a cellular phone to send SMS to tell them how to measure the level of the river and put it in a data to report it. So maybe we should think about coastal events this way, to train stakeholders, traditional stakeholders that can observe it and try to do it right away. They observe in a simple way. In Africa, we know that some places they don't have internet, or they need they don't have the structure to do huge experiments to that, but maybe we should think about traditional communities and to train them in simple measure. I don't know if you have talked about it, but I think to train the stakeholders in to do small, not experience, but measure some events, maybe it will help us to collect data and to guarantee that it is measured and that this data could be served not just for the scientific community, but also for them in meanings of aquaculture, fisheries, etc. I don't know if it makes sense, but I think it could help us. Thanks.
Thanks, Isabella, that you shared that. So I'm going to share later a presentation that Rui did. So how we started the meeting, we had a keynote presentation from a partner to inspire the topic. So today we are talking about operational infrastructure. And he showed, he's also a startup, so that's good that you mentioned that we should put innovation as a best practice. So maybe supporting those startups, it's something that, and they come up with those solutions that for sure help in places where we have less resources, and probably most of the area of the ocean, we don't rely on a lot of resource. So some things that I picked from your comments is that, so innovation is a best practice, and also including making sure that the data is not useful just for the scientists, but also for the person that is collecting that. Do you want to add something else so we can put on the stickers before I pass to another person?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone want to comment on what Isabella just said?
In addition to what Isabella said, another strategy would be to use or to train bachelor and master students to help with these initiatives, to help with observation and monitoring. And sometimes it might be easier to have the students commit to this purpose if, for example, they are part of a project and they have it in their thesis or in a scientific expedition for a class, or to somehow incorporate it in their curriculum.
Yes, and maybe it will increase the knowledge of scientific community of some data that we don't have access, because they are more time there in the beaches or in coastal lands. So maybe they could help us to get this information. Information is the word.
I think it's also important, and this is, we have, because we collect long-term data for environmental variables especially, so we have a lot of in situ instrumentation in the ocean, that although students and is not our main focus is to collect the data. But if you can make that data valuable to people to use, that they can use it in their work, in their research, or in their PhD, or in their masters, and they participate then in the collection, it's an excellent idea to use that free manpower to go and do ongoing maintenance, and they get experience. But that's why it's very important to have a research question in the beginning that doesn't just answer a personal question of the researcher, but a more open question that can attract interest from various projects that say, oh, but they have bottom temperature data for the whole year. How can we use it? Because we want to see if the whales come visit when there's a certain temperature in the bay. So the data set is available, but that person becomes involved in the project and then can be used to collect data. So yeah, that's very important.
I don't see hands on, but I will maybe get this link that you're talking and think about as operational infrastructure, if you think it is a best practice to add extended measurements when we observe marine biodiversity, because I think when we manage, so when we go beyond understanding the environment and the patterns, but if we want to manage these and mitigate problems, we need to have other types of data, not just occurrence and biodiversity data. I know several of the sites cannot rely on these accessory data because instrumentation for instance, to measure, I don't know, environmental impact may be cost consuming. But so if you have solutions about that, I think maybe it's a moment for us to talk about more applicated problems too, and this infrastructure, best practices that help us in this infrastructure. Isabella, one thing that, so maybe what we do here, so all this information that we get, usually we summarize those best practices and we put out to the community. Okay, so they serve as examples for the international community to see what are people doing and how they can, if they are implementing, for instance, a site or a research project. Okay, so that's why we gather this and then we publish later as an ocean best practice. Okay, so you're going to see that around. We also have the worst best practice. I don't know if you, maybe Shirley got these comments along the way. We don't like to talk a lot about that, but sometimes what we think, Frank Miller-Karger yesterday said something. We were talking, oh, we need to share our learning process, and then he said that that's very time consuming. It's best if we share what is good, like what he worked it out, because if we go back on all the mistakes, you know, we don't have time to do all of that, but we always have this side of what is the worst practice or the equipments maybe we can't rely on. I think this is something that also is good when we talk about infrastructure. So the procedures that we have in the lab and maybe the equipments that are not appropriate to that. So having this information about what it works best and in some types of environments. And this is also something, if you want to share about that, be free. I see Tim, also, if you want to comment on the data infrastructure, we're not talking about the data, but we need to have that too, and it counts. I see here with us, Lisa.
I think also, I think most of us know that if you work in the ocean, there's always limitations. And I find it to be open to suggestions how to do it regionally better. Being from South Africa and looking in how to expand into countries in Africa that are really, you cannot find everything you need there. You cannot always take everything you need with you. It's to how to apply to get the best science you can with the tools you have, and not to always be put down by a very, and I'm going to say, fancy European or American method that takes very intricate equipment to do the finest readings on environmental variables. That's not applicable for your country. It's not going to work in Mozambique. It's not going to work in South Africa. It's not going to work when you have nobody around you in the middle of nowhere. It can be absolutely the most fantastic best ocean practice, but if it's not applicable to the people that live, a scientist may visit and have lots of dollars and lots of euros, but when it comes to the country that has to maintain it, we live in rands, we live in different currency. We cannot buy those things. We have to do with what is available for us locally, and also the money we have, because so to just be open, and this is where this is so great, because we're all coming from areas that aren't always overflowing with technology and stuff. If it's going to work to put a camera in a waterproof plumbing tube and put it underwater, do it. That's when innovation comes from the struggles we have in making equipment that a lot of Europe, and I'm going to say European, students that come from Europe will pull up their nose and say, but you cannot dissect and do taxonomy on your table in your garden or under an umbrella on the beach. This is not how you take DNA. This is not how you do it. We cannot use the data. It's incorrect. We can use the data. We can do very good science on our beaches, on our rocky shores, that we are able to do, that a lot of people that are more privileged in their science frown upon. But you must be open to it. If I say you can do it with a very cheap camera or using your phone, this is not an iPhone. I need to have a phone. I want to do it. It has one camera. Not the whole. You have to apply the science to what the people have and what they can work with. If it's only 5 megapixels, don't say it needs to be 12 megapixels. Where am I going to get the 12 megapixel camera? So it's those struggles we have here, and which we understand. And it's always then nice to work with people in the country, in the area, to understand, not just come with your box of beautiful tricks and say, this is how you should do it. Then a project is never going to work for the long term, because if it means a person has to go and put a thermometer on a string down in the ocean, sit there for 5 minutes and take a reading, and that's what they can do, then that should be included, because that's valuable data. It's good data. It's just not highly technical data. So.
Thanks, Shirley. I totally see that happening here, but I will let someone comment. So Isabella has her hands raised. The floor is yours.
You're so right, Shirley. I was thinking about that. We have to engage not only the traditional communities, as we said, but also the students, the researchers, to really engage with the problem in that area and to understand which kind of access the people have. As I said, this girl is doing this startup using phones like Nokia, those phones that has no screens to touch, and some things like this. And we know that there are many traditional communities along the coast that don't have, not that they don't access this technology, unfortunately. So we have to understand how it flows in that community, how it what are the problems, the real problems, because the issue that a thesis wants to solve is not the issue of the community. The real issue is just some idea that the student had. So we must engage, not only the traditional community to say, oh, okay, I want to know what you know, learn, teach me, but the opposite too. Are the scientists open to understand this information that these communities want to give us? And that's it.
Basic questions they have. If you could just sit down on the beach and say, no, we are walking around and we are looking at the fish the fisherman has caught. We make a note on a piece of paper, but could you help? Maybe we can use this equipment. And then change it for every situation. It's co-design. It's such a actually good word these days that everybody use. The co-design of these research projects is essential for it to persist. Otherwise, it's just an extra thing they have to do for somebody else. But if it's an extra thing you can do for yourself, when you get the data and it makes your life easier and you get more, you will do it for longer.
Sheila, it was great that you said co-design. We were writing this here now, and there is all the proposals about co-designing, but I still think that it's hardly ever done. We may push now, so it's something that we for sure in under-resourced region needs to push those things. Also, not just co-design with traditional communities, but also co-design with decision makers, because not just our fund, but for sure maybe our observatories, they need to answer things that are available to the public. We have to have this perception, not we are not in a reality that we can extrapolate everything in science. We can go beyond in science for sure. That's important. I innovate, but we need to understand that the funding that it comes to us is it has to have a purpose also. And it's different from other countries where you have a lot of resources available, you know, and it doesn't mean that the science is gonna have less quality. Okay, it's just sometimes probably will be more applied, and that's okay. We will need to sleep with that. I think. I see some. So we have about 6 minutes to finish this session. It's been long. I will need, unfortunately, to cut. We have a ongoing workshop presential here in Brazil, and we also have a session later. So if you want to join, we will do the same session but with different people in another time zone, so we can cover the world. I would like to thank a lot everybody that is here. We gathered a lot of information that is on the Jamboard, and we will put that. I want to also give the message that the Ocean Best Practices is a very open community. It's a community about merging people and putting people together to collaborate, think about things that are working and could help each other. So this is a great environment for us, and an open environment for us to talk and listen to each other. And I'm gonna open the floor for you if you want to leave a last message for the future, and please stick around for the other sessions too. I don't see hands on, so I'll just close. We talk a lot. After 2 hours, we are always tired. So as I said in the beginning, there are some sessions that we may try to merge, especially the ones. So we had a very intense session on metagenomics and eDNA. I wasn't able to join it now, even that I'm part of the group. But I think it's important that we go around and see what people are talking, especially when we deal marine biodiversity. Everyone says it's very important, but we tend to be still in this OBPS community. We are still like, okay, everyone is measuring all these parameters, ocean variables, and like, what are the people with the marine biodiversity community doing? And like, it tends to be a different language, but we should for sure merge on that. And I see you around. I would like to thank Julia again for being with me here this morning. In the end of the later session, I get crazy because I don't have anyone to help me with the stick notes. I will put someone in charge, a volunteer later with me. Thanks a lot. See you guys around.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey,
Julia, Isabella is good. I would like to introduce both of you. Isabella Julia works in a very renowned center in Europe. So I just met her. I was lucky to meet her in this workshop. So if you can share contacts and things, I'm sure it's a person. She works with omics. So it may also be closer to what you do.
thank you for inviting me, Anna. Thank you, Julia. I've just moved to Sweden. I'm here in Södertälje since March this year. And well, I'm looking for opportunities as fellow in universities here around. I've just done an interview for CEPAS in UK, but unfortunately it's too far from me. It's not easy to go to UK. Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's too far. I have a son, and I cannot just leave him and go to UK and live there without them. So I'm looking for partners, in fact, to share not just opportunity, but information about how to approach, how to get in the groups. The Swedes are different. They are not like the Englishes, and not it's different here. They're more close. I mean, I can say that's not so easy to have a chat or something. And so I'm trying to get some information to how approach and to how apply for other jobs, etc. And that's it. Here I am.
Isabella is a senior editor of many of those scientific research in ecotoxicology. So she has been crazy about editing. I don't know how you can do that,
that's true.
being the editor.
Yeah, that's true. I've been, now I am an associate editor of a CVA. So it's the first time that I have an honorarium for that. So I'm not all without anything to do, but I really want to keep myself in academia. This is what we do, so I'm trying to get involved, but it's not easy as a Brazilian, as a woman, and so I'm trying to learn, and that's it.
But are you based on a university in Sweden, or you're looking? I didn't get this part. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Now I'm unemployed. Just.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was wondering because we have
as an editor, but it's not like an employment. You know, it's just something that it's like a consultant. I mean, and that's it. I'm trying to understand how it works. I've applied for many jobs here around academia and outside. I have the support of OBPS for Medlingen, which is the agents here in Sweden too. But they said that I am a problem since I am high qualified. So they have like jobs for cleaning, for serving, but not for me. So it's hard. I know it's not easy. But I am trying to do my best. So I'm trying to increase my network, to keep doing the editing, and that's it. And to have to make new friends, do colleagues, to understand how the things work around here.
I hope it does work. And I guess the first period will be hard, especially with the young kids. We have an opening, but it's in France, so I don't think you're.
Yeah, that's it. And everybody sends me like, okay, you're going to have an interview, and then I see it's in France or UK, or Netherlands. I have
Yeah.
2 vacancies I had in an interview, and they said, "Oh, okay, you cannot come to Netherlands." And so I'm looking for groups like programs that are part of the UA, the Union, European Union. I have applied for FAO, for UNICEF, what else? European Agency of Food. Yes, I don't remember the sign. Anyway, I'm trying my best, and that's it. But it's nice to meet you. I'm not vomiting everything on you. It's not the thing here. It's just to say that I'm open for making.
Yeah, sure. It's nice to meet you too, and yeah, thanks for joining. I think we had very lively discussions today, which was really nice.
And that's it.
Okay.
And thank you, Anna, for that. I'm really glad, and not just editoring these things, because that's a part of my time. And thank you very much for inviting me.
Okay, thanks, Bella. So, Julia, see you tomorrow.
Yeah,
And,
bye-bye.
Bella, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Okay. Ciao, ciao. Bye. Mwah.